Hey everybody, welcome back to another special episode of Rehash, a Web3 podcast. I'm your host, Diana Chen, and I'm excited to share with you today another episode we recorded live in Denver on March 1st, 2024 as part of our first live event at ETH Denver. This is bonus episode 2 of 3, and in this episode we are speaking with Irene Wu from Layer 0, as well as Foobar and Munam from Clusters, all about our multi-chain world. We'll be releasing our final bonus episode next Monday, which will also be our final episode of the season. So make sure you're subscribed to us on your favorite podcast platform, as well as on Substack or Mirror, and follow us on socials so you don't miss out on any of that. All of the links are in the show notes and on our website at rehashweb3.xyz. I hope you enjoy our live recording, and don't forget to follow, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to help others find out about Rehash as well. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Irene, Foobar, and Munam. We're live from Denver. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for people who've been here for all the recordings. You just staying recording after recording. Really appreciate you being here. This third recording is going to be on the multi-chain world. And so we're going to talk all about what that multi-chain world might look like. Our first podcast today, for those of you who were here, was an L2 Wars panel. So we had a little debate between Polygon, Arbitrum, and Optimism. And now we're kind of coming together and envisioning what that multi-chain world might actually look like in the future. So before we get into it, first of all, I would just like to say a quick shout out and thank you to our sponsors, Layer 0 and Clusters, who have joined me today on this panel. Layer 0 is an immutable, permissionless, and censorship-resistant protocol that connects blockchains. You can check them out at layer0.network. And Clusters is one name for all of your wallets and all of your chains. You can check them out and get your name at clusters.xyz. So today on this podcast, we have with us Irene Wu, who is head of strategy at Layer 0. And then we have Foobar, 0xFoobar on Twitter, who's the founder of Delegate/Clusters, and Munam Wasi, who is also at Delegate/Clusters. Thank you guys for sponsoring this event. Thank you for joining me on this podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you all about the multi-chain world. So I guess to start out, I want to just start by talking about why do we need all of these different blockchains, right? We have several L1s, Ethereum, Solana has really risen to the surface this cycle, and then we have so many L2s as well. Why do we need all of these blockchains? Why can't we just all operate on one chain?
I can start there by saying that if you've ever held assets or tried to use an application on one chain and then wanted to do something else on a different chain, you'll know that it's incredibly painful right now and cumbersome to do so. If our collective thesis around blockchains proves to be true, which is that there will be real usage in the world, penetration in, say, fintech and consumer applications is more than, say, 20%, then the user experience has to be greatly improved. And liquidity is an important piece of that. We're still in the earliest days, so asset values is a big part of it. Moving, say, a stable coin from one L2 to another L2 is still not a very seamless process. You have to go all the way back, wait the 7-day bridge back period, and then go through another native bridge, oftentimes expensing more gas, being exposed to more slippage. I think the summary is to build the most creative and novel applications that show uniquely what you can do with blockchain technology. You need to be able to leverage the best of multiple chains, but do so in a way that abstracts away the complexity.
Yeah, I think competition makes the world better. Different people value different things. And so you've got Bitcoin, who thinks that humans are fallible and we need to pick something and stick to it. And that, I think, has proved incredibly correct in the sight of lots of interesting decisions. ETH doing institutional grade, but still some modifications trying to clean up what does accelerationism look like on the MEV supply chain and being able to scale to millions of users while still having small nodes. You've got the Solana approach of crank it up to the max. And then newer approaches that experimenting with safer VMs, more interesting environments. So I think it's a net benefit for everyone. If you just had one blockchain, often stagnates, gets captured. So
yeah, would you say in a way that it's necessary too, with so many different projects being built on chain, that you inevitably have to have different blockchains that optimize for different things? Solana, crank it up to the max. Maybe if that's something that you optimize for and that you need in whatever it is you're building, that's somewhere that you might build. Whereas, somebody like an individual creator, for example, who just wants to build their own blockchain, their own rollup, might not care about that scalability and stuff like that. They might care about other features that they're able to have. Would you say that that's the case for different blockchains, is that they serve a different purpose and they serve almost a different customer base?
Yeah, exactly. And there's also path dependence in this process of you often need to get out the simple approach and get people comfy with that and using that and tease out what they really care about before moving on to the complex approach. You can't launch the fully formed final version. What does it mean to have an MEV supply chain if people are just sending ETH around, for example? UniV1 was good for its time, UniV2 was right for its time, UniV3 is right for its time. So there's a lot of this experimentation, and I think learning. You can't do step 10 until you use step 9.
I would go even further to say that these trade-offs are inherent to designing blockchains. Like, it is not possible to optimize for every single thing. And if you're building an app chain that's customized for, say, what your game needs, you likely will lack liquidity that is like most robust on, say, Ethereum. I was just giving this talk at the Stanford BAS event, and one thing I said at the end that was sort of like a wish list call for builders is to view chains more like programming languages. When you set out to build something normally as, let's say, like a Web2 developer, you don't think, I really love this programming language, what can I make with C++? You think, instead, here's this problem, I want to solve for it. Here's the user experience, the dream state flow, what do I have at my disposal? I have these front-end programming languages, back-end, everything. Right now, we look at chains like a real estate tax or like a tax to a landlord. It's commercial real estate. You choose where you launch your home base, and there's a lot of tribalistic affinity involved in that. With something like Layer 0 or immutable piping underneath it all, you can begin to leverage these inherently like trade-off articulated chains as different tools to create something composed and ideal for your user.
I also want to touch on one thing you said, Diana, which I hope doesn't go unnoticed, which was like, if you're a small creator wanting to create your own blockchain, I think we're at that point now technologically where, it is quite literally one click to create a chain through some of these platforms. And that is going to lead to a Cambrian explosion of chains. That's what creates fragmentation, which is kind of why we exist. And I would argue kind of why Layer 0 also exists as well, is that we're trying to solve these problems. When Bitcoin existed, the world was really simple. It's like, this is the one blockchain. And it had this mythos of like Satoshi and these OG cypherpunks. Then, Ethereum came around as a predecessor, and you had Vitalik, the super nerd, and the Ethereum Foundation core devs. Nowadays, you don't need to be like a mythological dev. You can click a button on a website and create a chain. And there needs to be tools to like unify that experience and make it accessible for every single person.
Yeah, so lots of benefits to having all of these different blockchains. They each serve their own purpose, and it's great because it gives everyone, a chain to use for their specific purposes. But on the sort of flip side of that is when we have all of these chains, it makes it sometimes incredibly cumbersome for the end user to interact with dApps and the different things that they want to do, whether it's games or minting NFTs or whatever it is. From a technical perspective, like on the back end, why is cross-chain interoperability so difficult? And I'm just assuming it's difficult because it hasn't really been done yet, but I'm non-technical, so I don't actually know what's happening that's making it so difficult.
When you ask about difficulty, do you mean why is it so difficult to build a protocol that can service this, or for application developers to create cross-chain experiences?
I guess both, yeah. So, I mean, we're seeing products now like Decence the Box that enables cross-chain minting and things like that, which is great, but that's super recent. And up until maybe like 3 months ago or so, like there was just nothing out there that, like if I was trying to mint an NFT on a new chain for the first time, I would have to go through the process of bridging ETH over in order to mint it. There was no other way to do it, no other shortcut to do it.
So a few key things come to mind. I think the first one is very overlooked, and it's the concept of unified semantics. Prior to Layer 0, there were attempts to create messaging protocols or messaging services, but integrating that into your contracts, say on Ethereum versus integrating it on Solana, was wildly different. That developer experience was different, and then also that relayed into the end user experience being different. For example, some bridges and messaging protocols that exist today on Solana still require your users to go and fetch the transaction themselves, and they'll need to have the gas token in their wallet. So just so you can see this in perspective, if you're trying to bridge something or even just perform some transaction on chain that is occurring on both Ethereum and Solana, you would need ETH and Sol in your wallet. That's a very prohibitive requirement for that user experience. I think the second thing is gas abstraction. Layer 0 and V1 implemented this, but Layer 0 is actually fairly new. We've been around for 2 years now, and the problem of interoperability is an age-old one. It's been a problem for like 50 years if you look at the interoperability issues of the internet. For Layer 0, what gas abstraction means is doing the exchange and quoting up front for the gas tokens you need so that the end user only pays with one token in one click. So those are the developer and user experience challenges. Then there's the security challenges. And the first approach to interoperability were wrapped asset bridges back in 2020. These are smart contracts that lock value within them, custodied by a third party. It could be a multi-sig of a handful of people in China or somewhere, or it could be a team that's venture funded, but fingers crossed that they don't push an upgrade to their contracts that introduces some vulnerability. You get minted a synthetic asset. You're constantly carrying with you the risk, the perpetual risk that other contract you don't control could be upgraded. I think people were terrified. After 2022, more than $1 billion were lost through bridge hacks. And so when DAOs are deliberating whether to expand or not, it's seen as this inevitability of the bridge will get hacked. It's just a matter of time. However, we at Layer 0 believe that there is a better way. There's a way you can build a messaging protocol that is evergreen. It's truly immutable, and it can evolve with research and time. That's what true protocol design should look like. And I guess to summarize then, it's on one hand that we haven't had strong and deliberate enough architecture and designs for building cross-chain live and on mainnet for a long period of time. We're really excited that Layer 0 V2 is now live on mainnet. And then on the other side, it's a new concept for developers to have the tooling to build cross-chain and do so in a way that they can deliver peace of mind to their users and for themselves.
So with regards to all of these problems that you highlighted, security and stuff like this, are there solutions to these problems that people are building, or is there always going to be this inherent risk with security and things like that people will just have to kind of deal with if they want to operate in this multi-chain world in the future?
I can answer it, but I'm actually really curious to hear what Foobar has to say, because we actually first met because I read their threads on security. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that there's always going to be some sort of trade-off at the limit of what does the security and UX frontier look like. But I'd say that status quo, we're probably 10x away from that. There are so many clear unlocks we can get when it comes to modular security, better validators, cleaner encoding, whatnot, that there's so much room for improvement that I'd say in theory, yes. In practice, no. We can just make things better. We can do strict improvements. The status quo is a multi-sig. Multi-sig signers disappear. People finally stop trusting those multi-sigs and relying on more distributed validator sets and nodes. So I feel like a common problem people have in crypto is they often point to some theoretical trade-off, a blockchain trilemma, maybe. And they say, look, it's impossible to hit infinity on all these points, therefore we can't improve. But no, actually you can get 10x, 100x, 1000x orders of magnitude improvements before you actually run into those core conflicts.
What does it take for us to get there? Is it more money, better devs? Like, what is it?
The constraint really does seem to be the right people and them being focused on the right thing. It's fascinating how little correlation there is between money poured into a project and the innovation and ethos that comes out of it. You look at a lot of the ICOs from 2017, 2018, and the innovation's not coming from there. It's often something that pops up out of the blue. So that's one of the things I love about crypto is it's very high leverage on an individual level. I don't mean leverage in the financial sense. I mean leverage in the impact sense. One person or a small team of 3 to 5 people can come in and ship a protocol in under a year that makes a real difference and does push the status quo forward. So that's something that I love. It's not present in other tech. It's not quite present in the SaaS world. It's very hard to find in other industries. So Yeah, the field is
I
right.
do, like, to challenge a little bit, I do think incentives and distribution opportunities matter a lot for pushing or accelerating the path to more advanced validation methodologies. And a great example of this is with layer 0, the verification layer is always permissionless. So you can run your own what we call DVN or decentralized verifier network. And it's also a business opportunity, so you can charge fees there. What can be a DVN? It could be a ZK Lite client or a ZK Oracle. It could be a consortium of your top delegates all signing. It can really be anything that can validate a message. And because now layer 0 is essentially a distribution channel for this, teams that otherwise might have considered building a ZK bridge but realized our bread and butter is actually just the validation there. It's not creating these really complex gateway contracts, can use layer 0 as the way to reach these developers, and with some funding has a clear path to a real business. And talented engineers will then want to go work for a project that has users.
Yeah, I think both are true, right? Like we've definitely seen projects that are way overfunded. Like they have no even proof of concept or anything. And during the bull run, they get millions of dollars of funding for really nothing. But at the same time, fair compensation is always,
Or an opportunity to have users. Yeah.
There's a flip
totally.
side to that too, I think, focusing on the users for a second, and that I think user expectation is something that can definitely be trained and developed once they get used to certain UI, UX patterns. I think we all kind of took it for granted during certain versions of the crypto ecosystem that we've had before that you are going to lose money. I know that when I was playing some of these very high yield APY ohm forks that I probably was going to get rugged within 30 minutes, and that happened multiple times. That was, I guess, part of the charm. But as products mature, and I think as they start to scale and get distribution, I think users start to demand certain things. That's the secret sauce at Delegate. We're a very small team. We don't have the ability to actually reach out to hundreds of projects at a time. That's just not possible. But because users get one delightful, joyful experience in one place, they go out and ask projects to implement it in other places. And that's been part of our secret to our success, is that our users have evangelized us to other people. That's something that can be possible. You can use a token for that. That's the easiest way of doing it. There have been a lot of these sort of anti-MEV protocols that say, keep everyone more safe and more efficient on chain, or at least financially safe and efficient on chain, and opt into our rewards network. We don't do that. We just focus on, pure security. But there are many pathways to also have your customers be your biggest advocates. And that, I think, is one of the things that's changing. I think a lot of developers are now starting to realize that you can't just write a smart contract in the wild. There are a lot of them out there. You kind of need people to carry the torch for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we envision a multi-chain world, once we solve all of these problems that we've discussed, what does that look like to you guys? And I'd love to hear as many examples and real life use cases from the end user perspective, as well as a dev tooling perspective of what that looks like for everybody.
I can start. I think the main idea that people haven't quite caught on to yet, but they will over the next year or two, is chain abstraction. The idea that you've got your account, your assets, and some are on Bitcoin, some are on Ethereum, some are on Solana, some are elsewhere. People have this experience within a native centralized exchange, a Coinbase or a Binance. In a way, centralized exchanges are proto-bridges. They bridge from the fiat world into the on-chain world, but they also bridge across chains. We don't think of them as playing that role typically because they don't have protocol aspects to them. They're not composable. They're often, they are centralized, hence the name. But this experience hasn't quite percolated over to the crypto native world yet of self-custody. If you're using Ethereum, you might be on MetaMask, you might be on Rabby. If you're on Solana, you might be using Phantom Wallet, Backpack Wallet. If you're on Bitcoin, you go Google what a Bitcoin wallet is and whether it supports ordinals. and people give up on this because it's too hard. I'm a week behind on claiming my airdrops because I haven't gone through and done the necessary work for which extension is necessary where. And that experience, that fragmented experience, will be replaced with what I call universal apps. An app where it's the same experience no matter what underlying execution environment you're on. If you think about it, you open up a Chrome browser. You don't know whether Chrome is written in JavaScript or C++ or Python or Rust. Maybe it's a combo of them. All you know is that your experience on Chrome on desktop is similar to your experience on Chrome on the iPad, on mobile, and so on. And so what's the equivalent of that for crypto? I think we're going to see apps come a lot more to the forefront. There's been a very heavy infra focus, as is proper and necessary. You can't build apps without good infra. But universal apps are going to be what onboard the next billion users.
So essentially the user experience is, for example, I have an ETH wallet. Say I only have ETH in my wallet. I don't have Solana. I don't have Bitcoin, anything. I can still interact with Solana apps without getting a Phantom wallet or getting any Solana or anything like that. And that whole user experience is super seamless as long as I have a wallet of some kind on some chain.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of have this at the wallet level. You look at new Phantom releases, for example, have EVM support. But this hasn't happened at the app level yet. If you want to use a DEX, it's Jupyter on Solana, it's Uniswap on Ethereum. If you want to use a naming service to put clusters at the forefront, is it Ethereum name service or Solana name service or Avalanche name service or a Binance name service? It's a little ridiculous. Right. So these apps, I think especially ones that help users configure core bits of their profile, core bits of their identity, really stand to take off. I mean, the future world I envision is where ENS and SNS and BNS and ANS are all rolled up into your unified user profile, your universal cluster.
I would say wallet multi-chain design right now is still very much strength, like within the box, not outside of it, meaning what is avant-garde is to have a drop down and you can choose which chain you're on, or like, look, now you can see all your assets in one place. I'd love for someone who's never used wallets before to come in and try and design something with the requirements of having to support assets which have particular traits or originate in different places. It may look wildly different. I also think if we succeed in a multi-chain world, how many tabs does a person have to open to achieve what they wanted to by using your app? And like you said, would you have to go get Sol? Well, that's another tab you open. That's another opportunity for user churn. We don't talk very much about churn, and yet we do it every single day. I remember when I was in Istanbul, I was trying to buy something, and very cool that they accept USDC, but it was on Solana. And I live and breathe interoperability. This is my life. It took me 6 hours, and I ended up calling a friend and did a janky OTC swap. And then there were like tears in my eyes also. So yes, we're in a multi-chain present, but it's like a pretty janky one right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I've talked about this on the podcast a lot, but I really enjoy collecting different types of media. And anytime I come across a new piece of media on a chain that I haven't operated on before, I probably will pass on at least 3 to 5 of these NFTs that I could be collecting and minting until I finally am like, okay, fine. It looks like there's some traction on this chain. Let me finally go bridge some ETH over here so I can actually like take actions on it. And I'm probably in like the top like 0.1% of people who care about collecting media NFTs. And there's already so much friction for somebody like me. Same thing with you. Like if it takes you 6 hours to figure something like that out, then like there's just no way that we can expect anyone that's not deep in crypto.
And oftentimes getting onto all of these new places is like a completely different experience just because like the bridge might be designed slightly different or there might be different sets of approvals that you haven't gone through before. I know, like, for the sake of my personal research, sometimes when I've heard of new chains, I've just pinged friends in group chat like, hey guys, have you heard of this chain? And then I'll like wait and see what they complain about before I go in and try to figure it out myself. You know, it's a great way of doing that. There's also another aspect of this stuff, like we've been talking about it from the individual user perspective. I think universal applications that can exist independently can also help companies and like protocol providers also reach other communities and chains, depending obviously on what type of product it is. One of the things with clusters that we've been chatting with are some proof of humanity protocols, and they have EVM-based zero-knowledge proof hashes for like personhood. They would love to serve everybody who uses Bitcoin or everybody who uses Solana, but rebuilding your entire company like in Rust for Solana is actually a lot of work. It just doesn't make sense for a lot of people to do that. You know, the Bitcoin VM isn't really real. You can't really do that over there. But when you have like universal apps that give you like opinionated interfaces, but also generalizable ones at the same time, you're able to do clever things. Some of these protocols are considering the possibility of attesting for the personhood of people that have Solana addresses or Bitcoin addresses if within their cluster they have a EVM address that contains like this hash. That's one particular example, obviously unique to how we're designed, but I think it underscores a new type of thinking. Like, how can I think a little bit outside of the box? And instead of viewing what I have built as limited just my ecosystem, how can I take advantage of other tools and services and like other people's distribution to also, connect with users on multiple chains and multiple wallets?
Do you think on the flip side that there are any disadvantages to a multi-chain world, or from the perspective of individual chains or individual builders, is there any reason why they might not want to engage in interoperability?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that there are a couple. The dominant one, interestingly enough, is not even technical. It's social. All my friends are here, and they will get mad at me and make fun of me online if I go somewhere else. So there's very strong tribal dynamics where people try to have this zero-sum mentality of there are only so many users in the world. They're either with us or not with us, which doesn't make sense when you have sub 1% penetration, but that feeling is there. Beyond that, there are some interesting technical problems to solve as well. A naive multi-chain approach can reduce to the security of the weakest chain. So your universal app is on 10 chains, and just one of them goes down. And if you've configured things poorly, that one going down can cause cascading failures. Now, I think that's more of a failure to think ahead. That's not inherent to universal apps. You just need to think carefully about what are your trust assumptions and what are you relying on there. But it does add a bit of complexity, and you have to build a generalized architecture from the start. Mm-hmm. It's a bit like when you're putting together a house. Oftentimes you need to know how many stories is there going to be. If there's going to be a basement, you can't build the second floor and then decide after the fact you want a basement. Mm-hmm. Or if you do, it's very, very clunky to go in and rebuild that. So a lot of protocols, I think, sprung up in the single chain maxi world. All there was with Ethereum and all there was MetaMask. And what they needed to do was sprint to the finish line for this specific snapshot of what does crypto look like. And it's been a little harder to adapt. With Delegate, we focused on building for the multi-chain, multi-wallet world from the very start. And that's been a huge advantage. I think we've gotten our deployment time for protocol onto new chains down to sub 15 minutes. Other protocols take 15 weeks, sometimes 15 months, which seems excessive on that bit. But it really is planning ahead and thinking about what is the world going to look like, not what does it look like today.
The protocols that struggle the most I've seen are the ones that started a single chain, and then their approach to cross-chain was multi-chain, meaning these isolated deployments on multiple chains, often after really laborious governance processes. And then now it's, okay, we have to do a whole V3 or V4 to make it universal or to make it cross-chain. Now we actually want to be able to have users lend on chain A and borrow on 3 others in one click. That's a total rewrite. And every time you have to do total rewrites, there's a lot of code exposure. There's all of the potential vulnerabilities you could introduce. It's really, really scary. I think another downside is we have, lack of education and knowledge across the industry. A lot of the knowledge around security cross-chain is very esoteric, and you have to be really, really deeply in the know or commit multiple months maybe to doing proper research and diligence. And then there's, the difference of bridges versus messaging services versus messaging protocols. A service is not the same thing as a protocol, and I see many projects integrate something that depends on the liveness of the creator company to maintain the integrity of the product. That means if you're using something that enables interoperability or bridging, but they can't raise venture funding, your Slack connect with them is gone. Like, how ridiculous that this whole industry that is built around creating really like cypherpunk type products, things that should be entirely individual and free, once again, settle down to whether there's like funding and real people behind it. So the education there around what you should choose for your cross-chain stack is not where we want it to be.
Yeah, so are you guys saying that for multi-chain world to exist that you see a lot of current protocols or current apps are going to have to rebuild from the ground up? Or can we build new tools that we can then use on top of the existing things that we have in order to enable cross-chain functionality?
I think the multi-chain world is here, like it or not. How can apps best adapt to it? I think there are huge improvements for standardized approaches to universal apps. It's a lot of work and it's very hard to reinvent all these things from first principles. But that doesn't have to be the case. I think you can rely on good approaches and mimic those. For example, if you want to make a new DEX, you don't have to invent XY equals K from scratch. You can be inspired by Uniswap code, so on. If you want to make a new blockchain, a new L2, you don't have to code the entire VM from scratch. You've got well-tested, robust things that you can then improve on from there. So we're not here today. Hopefully we can make a dent in this. But I think that the first truly successful universal apps serve as a template, an example for everyone else to copy, and then the work is cut by 90%. So I'm optimistic.
I think one of the important things over here is to also challenge, I guess, like the assumptions that a lot of applications have made. I think there will always be tools that you can duct tape together to, sort of get to where you want to go. And that's fine. Sometimes that's the best that you can do short of rebuilding everything from the ground up. And you can't always rebuild from the ground up whenever a new paradigm or sort of new dominant thing comes to market. But I think it is helpful to at least not drink too much of the Kool-Aid that is being served everywhere. People always talk about the next 1 billion users. If you look at a lot of apps, the top 10,000 users are 99.99% of all of their volumes. That's a very important thing to remember. A lot of people talk about this sort of future tech, account abstraction that we're all waiting for and sort of things like these. What does that do to the millions of users that there are today? A lot of people are still building with the idea that one wallet equals one account. These are the sort of things that I think take a little bit of introspection, regardless of whatever it is that you're building, that can serve to unlock for you the possibility of being more flexible. So it's slightly imprecise, but I think not being dogmatic in what you're basing everything on is your best bet at being able to duct tape yourself with some other tool that comes out and be able to serve people wherever the crypto world goes.
I think the teams that right now, if they're at inflection point of a V2 or V3 and are thinking about building very elegant and immutable primitives and abstracting away the maybe configurations or parameters that change on a shorter time span, are at an advantage. A team that comes to mind that's doing this for lending and borrowing is Morpho. And they're a team out of Paris. Really admire their approach. It's very aligned with Layer 0, which is for that core primitive, make it immutable. And everything else that a particular user or developer is trying to customize, make that be configurable and something you can change at any time above that. And for us, when we built V1 and V2, the idea was you should be able to change the validation methodologies you're using for cross-chain as your protocol grows as well. At the very beginning of your DEX, there might be 100,000 users. That's already very ambitious, and maybe $1 million that you're securing. But 2 years from now, you could be securing $1 billion and have many, many users. And your infrastructure should be, yes, immutable, not changeable under your feet. That's how you can be the victim of contagion risk, but also can change where it needs to change. Now, ZK Lite clients are ultra performant, let's say 2 years from now, and you can customize it very easily using 6.6 SP1, whatever it is. You should do that without having to write new code. And the teams that are thinking that way now, rather than thinking, okay, let's hack together some short-term solution where we can aggregate this bridge and this bridge, because honestly, we don't know how messages are validated, but hopefully more means that we have a lower risk of some hack. That's going to lead to a lot of technical debt. So, speed and I think a more product design, intuitive-driven approach will serve some of these new projects really well.
Timing-wise, I know, Foobar, you said that we're already in a multi-chain world, whether we like it or not. But timing-wise, in order to get to a point where we're actually seeing that from the end user perspective, that there is this cross-chain interoperability and that this user experience has been greatly improved from what it is now. When do you guys expect that to happen? And do you think we're at a stage where we need that to happen with the next bull run in order to really get crypto like enough mainstream adoption, or at least enough escape velocity within the mainstream in order to make sure that it survives and we get there sooner than later?
Mm-hmm. I think we sit at a super critical inflection point this year and next, to be honest. There's obviously this wave of, I wouldn't call it institutional adoption, but perhaps institutional buying and stakeholding in these core assets. At the same time that we haven't seen as many killer apps as we'd have liked to. There are some extremely promising ones, Friendtech, Driphouse, so on, but we're still sitting at 2 to 3, not 20 to 30. So I think that it's actually this year, 2024, next year, 2025, as we see the explosion of L2s, the explosion of new L1 experimentation, that a lot of people are taking their second or their third look at this, and they're a bit impatient. They're saying crypto's been around for a decade. What have you delivered?
Yeah.
The internet had done interesting things a decade in. Turned out that's not true either, but their revisionist history makes it say so. It's incredibly clear to me that crypto is going to win, is a superior both financial stack, but also social stack, cultural stack, and so on. But what does that path dependence look like? I'd say these years when all eyes are on the industry are critical. You can't have people getting rugged. It's got to be simple. It's got to solve real problems for real people. So,
do you think there needs to be more innovation during these couple of critical years, or do you think there needs to be just like, let's just make what we have better? Like innovation is not key. Let's just make the baseline better first before we do cooler things on top of it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's both, frankly. Oftentimes, the improvements to the base user experience come from far out moonshot ideas. Making a pen so an astronaut can ride in space while they're floating around turns out to have real implications. The internet itself was a DARPA innovation for the military. Turns out it's great for watching Netflix. So I think that these do go hand in hand.
I think there's also a little thing over here in that I think as crypto is starting to open up to more people and we're getting people that aren't just cypherpunk devs that are taking a look at this stuff, that's where we'll start to see a lot of different diverse thoughts shaping how products and experiences are delivered to people. I think this is now where the most technical amongst us are totally fine with just sitting on Etherscan and interacting with a contract that way. But this is where people who are like really good designers are able to come through and say, you know, how can I make this a delightful and joyful click-through experience? Those sort of like 1% to 2% extra differences that are coming from voices that aren't singularly focused on new code and sort of a new thing being built that way, I think really improve a lot. I was at some event at ETH Denver yesterday, and there was a girl over there who's like a UI UX designer for a like small software company in the area, and she said these people always look like they're having fun, and I like how a lot of their work is like art related as well. I'd love to figure out like how this industry thinks about UI UX. And she wasn't even being opportunistic about it. It's not like she was trying to get money or anything, but that's like a perfect example of someone that got sort of happy because of the vibes that she saw and wanted to offer a fresh perspective. She didn't come in here saying, how can I create the next high yield farm or whatever. This is someone who said, I like designing interfaces and I'd love to find a cool project and help them make a nice interface. And that is also a really big part of unlocking this.
Yeah, I think the heavily like degen communities that just we all want to yield farm and do stuff like that exist for the purpose of community, for people to feel they can be degen with other people together. But in order to reach the mainstream and the masses, we need a lot more than that.
There's one more thing I'll add over here, which is like, look at crypto gaming. I think crypto gaming's in a very interesting place and is actually starting to come roaring back. The sort of first iteration of crypto games were these very like spreadsheet video games, basically. It was like min-maxing how much money can you make by like moving money here or there. But there are these new sort of crypto game experiences that are popping up that are like starting to blow up, that are similar to things that are popular in the real world. In China, there's this game called Heroes of Mavia or something like that, and it hit #1 in the Chinese App Store and it's blown to over $2 billion FTV, and you know, all of these nice like crypto performance stats, but ultimately it's kind of like Clash of Clans. It turns out everybody loves Clash of Clans, so it makes sense that a crypto game that doesn't feel like, I'm sitting with some like poker player, elite mathematician, just losing my money clicking on random like spreadsheet boxes, makes a big difference as well.
Yeah, I do think that like China in particular, because you brought that up, has done a really good job of super apps. And it almost feels like a shame that they're like not more welcoming to blockchain, because I feel like they know a thing or two about developing a universal app, and they could really be at the forefront of that.
Chinese grandmas, they know what's going on.
All right, well, any final thoughts before we wrap up this panel about the multi-chain world and what we can expect?
One thing that was coming to mind is you were asking about when the inflection point is going to be, or how important the next 2 years are versus 10 years. At Layer 0, or at least how I think about my work at Layer 0, I try to think a lot more along the time frame of 10 years or 5 years. I'm a fairly impatient person, but what this forces me to do, and what I talk about a lot with friends who are building protocols, is there's a really strong desire to get short-term validation from your peer set in this industry. And so I think by continuing to think about or align with the tribalistic affinity of particular chains or new chains that are coming out, and immediately looking for the satisfaction of praise on crypto Twitter, you are building your product around principles of the opinions of a small set of people. And a leader who comes to mind who I think has done a great job of both achieving that, but also actually prioritizing a different set of opinions is Luca from Pudgy Penguins. The opinion that mattered to him and his team were the opinions of like 6-year-olds in Ohio. And they've achieved that. They built these really adorable plushies and these like figurines, and at the same time have really won over all of us, everyone at Layer 0 as a Pudgy. It was like a holiday bonus a couple of years ago, because we are really excited to wear on our sleeves something that is used and appreciated by people like our cousins or our childhood friends. So at least I always think to myself as like a parting note here to try and be a little bit more patient and think long term. And for cross-chain in particular, it's something that will require a lot of novelty around how you use primitives like Layer 0. Right now, the product market fit is around omni-chain fungible tokens, or tokens which can seamlessly transfer between different chains. And that is a huge step forward towards chain abstraction. But I want to see games where you can perform an action on chain A and it mutates an asset you have on chain B, and that's your Twitter PFP. I played Neopets growing up. It's like you win something, now your Neopet has a crown over here, and have all of this be really low latency. And I think that's going to take time and less of looking around your peer set.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all have a little bit of revisionist history, as I think one of you guys said earlier, about how fast tech has developed even to this day. Mm-hmm. And we all want like the immediacy of everything nowadays. So yeah, patience is definitely key. What about you guys? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'd closed up echoing what Irene said. Even if the next couple of years are an inflection point, the core principle that drives every one of our products that I ask myself before even embarking on architecture, development, distribution, so on, is, does this have a shot at being relevant and useful in the year 2030? It's amazing how many short-termist ideas that filters out. It leads to some more esoteric choices because these problems are not quite well understood today. But there's no better feeling than putting something together that really can last, that is immutable, that is composable, that's used today by hundreds of protocols like Delegate already is, and ideally thousands in the future. So couldn't be more excited, and just want to encourage everybody to go check out Delegate and Clusters.
Amazing. Munam?
A lot of people come to crypto for lots of different reasons. I think I was drawn to crypto, number one, because it was kind of fun, and a lot of the people that were sort of behind it echoed some of my anarchistic tendencies. And the reason why I bring that up is I think that we're at a critical point now where lots of things have been built out and lots of things have lots of different variations, and now we're starting to see like historical patterns emerge. I think it becomes fun when people stop taking certain things as dogma and stop thinking like there's only one way of doing something. And that's why I think if you're able to inject a little bit of personality or opinion, even on something like front-end design, you're able to create something great. A lot of crypto apps look exactly the same as each other. Just being willing to look a little bit different really stands out. Like the Layer 0 team, we always used to laugh about it, that we'd see their front end and it's like very flashy and like techno-like. And I remember when we were in their offices, we said, oh, the designer team must be like a Berlin DJ. It turns out they are from Berlin and all of this stuff. Like that sort of little bit of pizzazz over there is the type of stuff that I think really does start to stand out. For clusters, we gave everybody a little Twitter video that just had their name pop up on it. And, most people didn't even post it to Twitter, but every single person that we've met said like, oh, it's kind of cool. Like I have my little video saved on my phone and, it's just my name on it. And that little bit of extra joy, I think, is the X factor moving forward. Be opinionated. Don't necessarily do what anyone else tells you to do, and try to build for the long term. That's it.
I love it. Well, thank you guys so much. Before you go, tell people where they can find you on the interwebs if they want to follow you and learn more.
I am on Twitter or X at Irene Wu 27, and Telegram's the same handle.
I'm on Twitter at 0xFoobar, 0xFoobar, and you can find our website at clusters.xyz.
I am Munam. The Twitter handle and Telegram handle is at MUNAMWASI. Or you could just DM the delegate account. I will be the person responding back to you. And please do so.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for joining this panel. I feel very bullish about our multi-chain world, the future of the multi-chain world. So thank you so much. And thank you again for sponsoring this podcast event too.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.